Hello, and welcome to Ficsation, where I talk to my guests about their fiction fixations. I'm Daniel Radford, author, podcaster, and maker of things, and today I'm joined by fellow author S.S. Fitzgerald, sorry, otherwise known as Shaun. Hello.
Hey Daniel, thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you, especially given the subject matter is a favorite of mine. That subject matter, of course, being Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Crichton just as an author has been a huge inspiration for me, and I have to just admit that growing up in the 90s, growing up on Jurassic Park probably shaped a lot of that, and then discovering his novelization and how phenomenal of a novel it was after being used to the movie for years was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, that is pretty much exactly what my experience was as well. I would have first seen that movie probably in the early 2000s. I don't imagine it was shown to me, but when I was, five, but but it immediately became a favorite. And even before I could properly appreciate why it was so good, because dinosaurs
Yeah, what kid doesn't love dinosaurs, right? Which is oddly enough a quote from the novel.
from the movie. I think it's in the book too, actually.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense to take them both, right?
Yeah. And obviously, as I got older, I started appreciating why it was so good. And then I learned that it was a book first, and still didn't pick up the book for a while later. And then it was probably 10 years ago, if not more now, that I actually read the book. But I picked up the book and I was like, oh, the book is also really good.
Yeah, and what I really love for anybody who hasn't experienced both back to back is there's a lot of similarities between them. There's key moments that show up between the book and the movie. But if you experience just one of them, you can experience the other side and feel like it's a brand new experience because the novel has so much going on to it. And admittedly, and I've said this to multiple people before, the novel Jurassic Park is absolutely a horror novel with the way that he told the story.
Yeah, like I think especially for people who are coming in after, like, if their entry point is like the Jurassic World movies, if they pick up the book there, I think people would be very surprised because the first movie is I would call it a horror movie for sure. The first two even. But the book, it's brutal.
Yeah. He did not pull any punches with the animal attack scenes. There's so many that just stand out, and his ability to write a vicious animal attack scene and make you feel like you're emphasizing with the character, whether or not you like that character or not, in their death was just cardinal to the entire experience.
Yeah. It's true because, like, in the movie, Nedry getting mauled is almost funny because he deserves it.
Yeah,
But in the book, even Nedry coping some unfortunate experiences makes you go, "Ooh, I don't know if he deserves that."
yeah. I mean, you mind if I share like that? I'm not going to be too graphic, but I don't want to,
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
go nuts.
definitely.
This is
Okay.
I don't market this for any for towards kids. If anyone who isn't able to handle it shows up, sorry.
No, perfect. So, yeah, Nedry's death is extremely violent. So the first part is that the novelization version of the Dilophosaur is more accurate to the fossil record. So it's a large creature. It's not a small creature like in the movie. And it catches Nedry and temporarily blinds him. And he's fumbling around. And then he feels something hit him and he goes down. And then he starts feeling warmth. And as he's trying to fumble around, like what's in his hands, because he's feeling mud and he's feeling water, and then he's feeling this warmth and then something tubular. He realizes he's holding his own guts. And as that realization's coming to him, he feels the creature pick him up by his head. And that's how it ends for Nedry. It's not this cut to, a Jeep rocking back and forth with some screaming. He had a very violent end. Every character that ends up being killed in Jurassic Park, it is a very graphic scene, which is why I go back to saying Jurassic Park. It may be a techno thriller, and that's how it's marketed, but it's 100% a horror novel as well.
Yeah, I never even heard it marketed as anything else. So to be fair, I don't know much about how the book was marketed at all, but I picked it up and I expected it to be a horror novel, and I read it and I was not disappointed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just I think a lot of people went into the Jurassic Park series from the movies, which is fair. They were phenomenal movies. Um, there's just so much behind the novel, though. Like even the beginning scene. We get two different perspectives if you watch the movie and then read the book. In the movie, you get the actual moment that the guy is attacked by a velociraptor. And we know from little side conversations with the attorney that he didn't make it, he passed away. In the novel, you get a medical professional who's off the coast of the island. I can't remember what country they said the
Costa
doctor was.
Rica.
Yeah, so she's sitting in Costa Rica in an old medical office, and a helicopter comes in, touches down, drops this guy off, and they say, "Yeah, he got caught under an excavator while we were digging out some construction sites." And he's like mauled up, and she's like, "This looks more like a tiger attacked him, right? There's like saliva in his wounds." And he's speaking Spanish. She doesn't speak Spanish, which is unusual being a medical professional in Costa Rica, but it is what it is. And he keeps saying raptor over and over again. And he eventually, expires. So she's trying to figure out what raptor is. And again, this is set in the late 1980s, early 90s. And she's doing her research and she can only find bird of prey and nothing that actually connects to, a velociraptor. Because who would think that a velociraptor was real at the time period?
Yeah, as that is one of the benefits of the book is that they spend I wouldn't say Crichton spends an inordinate amount of time on setup, but he definitely spends more time on setup because he has the liberty to do so, it being a book. There's always more space to do things like that in a book.
Yeah, 100%. You benefit from a little bit more of the mystery and the build up to it, because there's also an investigation that happens where another attorney unrelated to Engine is looking for like why are they buying supercomputers? Why are they putting it on this island out there in the middle of nowhere? Why is there so much concrete being purchased? So there's a lot of corporate mystery that's being built up, which is also kind of like a telltale sign of Michael Crichton's work. If you read his work Airframe, it's very much in the same realm of that, of how he tries to build up that inner fight between Engine and was it Biogen? I
But
think
it was
the
something, I think.
Biosyn. That's what, yeah,
Biosyn.
Biosyn. A really fun way of telling the story. I think another part that you get in that is like when the characters are finally introduced to the island, that they know something else is going on because there's precautions that don't make sense to them when they first arrive. Like they're in a hotel and everything's not quite put together yet, but like all the hotels have like 6-inch bars that go across the windows. And one of the characters, I think it's Grant, says that he can tell that they built the window and then somebody retroactively came back and remodeled it and re-put the bars in. So they were not a part of the original construction plan, which builds up a lot of that lore that has come out around Jurassic Park since the movie, where people make like the found footage images of Jurassic Park, which by the way, if you haven't seen them, go out there and look them up. There a lot of them were fun.
I
And
haven't.
it
I'll have to
tells
look those up.
Oh yeah, there's a great one out there that follows like Muldoon's like video diaries, but there was multiple attacks that Engine had covered up, and you get hints of that throughout the story in the novel that Hammond, who is also drastically different from his movie version, knew that there were problems with the island, but he was suppressing it because he knew that there was going to be a lucrative deal. So he constantly was making exceptions to things, doubling down, putting in new security features, not admitting that dinosaurs are getting off the island, even though that's a big plot point in both the second movie and the first novel, that they're sending teams out and burning these bodies that they're finding washed up on beaches all around the world.
Yeah, that scene from the second movie with the little girl at the beginning is actually from the original book.
Yeah, yeah, and even more so, they go into it more with those copies escaping, and they get into like I don't want to say a nursery, but that's the best word I can come up with right now. But into a child's room that's in the crib, and a mother
That's
finds the copies.
right.
Yeah, killing a kid essentially. which is another part of that legal battle that's happening in the background behind Engine that we never see in the movie version of it.
That's one of the things I really appreciate about the book, is that because they have all this extra time, they are free to explore all that stuff that's sort of hinted at in the movies, but they can never really show because they just don't have the time to do it. And you get a very clear picture of the fact that they are already starting to lose control before the scientists even get onto the island. It sets up what Nedry is really up to a lot more clearly and obviously, compared to the movie, which is very, very brief about it because they have to be. And
Yeah,
all of that, the stuff with the bars and all that as well, showing the attacks are happening on the island, that all of that builds this sense of foreboding because you can see all the pieces for a disaster are already there, already active, already happening. You can see that
yeah.
the disaster has begun before we even get to the island and experience the story.
And then I love the moment, and it never happens in the movie, unfortunately, when Ian is still in the vehicle in the tour cars, and they're talking about the how they introduce new batches of the dinosaurs with each new generation because they're trying to work out flaws. And on the console, they put up graphs and they show the reintroduction of each new generation, and they're talking about the copies again. And Ian says, "Yeah, I can tell that they're breeding just by all the information you've given me." The control room, Arnold doesn't understand it, and Ian explains that if you have a normal distribution, you're going to see a bell curve, which means that the dinosaurs are breeding and dying at an expected rate. He goes, but that's not what you're doing. You're introducing a new batch every time. So what it should be is it should be like a bell curve stacked on top of a bell curve over and over again. And he goes, that's what it should look like. But you just showed me a normal bell curve, which means that they're breeding and you're probably losing dinosaurs because you should have multiple generations here and we're not seeing all the generations here. So Ian points it out just mathematically because he's a mathematician that the dinosaurs are both breeding and escaping. And this is like middle of the novel. This, but they shut him down. They explain that it's not possible. They have all these sensors and everything, and they set up the hubris of Jurassic.
It's one of those things where build up matters. Being able to have that time to build up all of that, the background lore, the tension, that showing you that everything is already starting to go wrong, that everything is already in place for a massive disaster. It's the Hitchcockian kind of suspense. The idea that it's more tense because you understand what is happening and can see what is coming before it happens.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate with Michael Crichton in the way that he did that suspense buildup is he used what was popular at the time period when he wrote Jurassic Park, which was still a very archaic version of dinosaurs. People still had the old clay animation idea of dinosaurs being slow and lumbering giants. And he puts that in the novel when he has a conversation with Dr. Wu and Hammond. And Dr. Wu says, I don't know. I think the American public they're not ready for fast, realistic dinosaurs. Why don't we just genetically make dinosaurs that are slow and meets their mental image of what a dinosaur is based on old media? And Hammond wants nothing of it. He wants the most realistic thing ever, which then leads to the demise that builds up to what happens to Doctor Wu, which is he gets killed by a very fast moving dinosaur that he ended up cloning.
Yeah. And that is one of the things is like there is because we've touched on it a couple of times up to this point in that things do diverge between the book and the movie. It was and one of the I didn't say that very clearly, the book and the movies. And one of those things is how people die, who dies. There is definitely some differences. Like the movie very much captures the spirit of the book and by and large does it justice, don't get me wrong. But there is definitely things that are different. And I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about the things that are different between the two.
Yeah, do you have a start point that you want to start with?
Well, you mentioned Hammond, and I think that is a great start point.
Yeah, Hammond's a drastically different character.
In the movies, he's a bit of a whimsical old fool. You know, he's determined. He's less of a greedy capitalist nightmare. He genuinely wants to make a place that will inspire wonder in people because of his own experiences growing up. He wants to create a place where the wonder is real, and this was his way of doing that. In the books, he's really in it for the money.
Yeah, so much so that this isn't his only business venture that was just a cash grab, right? Like he had a miniature elephant that he made that
Yeah,
he would go around and like reveal to people as kind of like a road show. Yeah, he is a old school oligarchic type business runner, and he's in it just for the money. He doesn't really care about his grandkids being there on the island, which completely is opposite of what happens in the movie version of it.
yeah.
Uh,
In the movie, it's his grandkids being in danger that sort of makes him see sense. In
yeah,
the
not so
books,
much.
not
Yeah,
so much in the books.
yeah, I don't. He doesn't really have a redemption arc that I recall anywhere in the book. I mean,
No, not really.
aside from his fate, which is more
Which is
his. I think
karmic
it's weird.
justice more than redemption.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how moments of Jurassic Park, the original novel, there were so much put in that novel that Hollywood wasn't able to make one movie. So you see elements of the novel in all the movies instead of just like a single.
Yeah, Hammond. It's just he's so different, and I don't know if I don't have a version of him that I like better. I mean, I like the movie better as a person, but as a character, I don't necessarily think either version is superior to the other. It's just they achieve different things. In the movie, he highlights the hubris and the folly because he's under the impression that he can do this, that, yes, there's been mistakes, but he can get a handle on it eventually. He's a fool and he's overconfident and he pays for it, but not as badly as his book counterpart does, who is greedy, who is only in it for the money, who is well aware that people are getting hurt and dying and is actively engaged in the covering of it all up and everything, who's really not attached to his grandkids in any meaningful way and not that is more bothered by what is going to happen to him than anything. And he does pay for that very violently.
Yeah, the closest we get to the novel version of Hammond is in some expanded media that's from the video game called Trespasser, which is set as a prelude or I guess an epilogue to the Lost World, and you get like his voice diaries. It's done by the same actor, but it talks about like the political fallout that happens and some of the details around Jurassic Park. But even that doesn't really get into how crappy of a human being Hammond was. And another giant divergent was even though we are following key members of the adventure in Jurassic Park, it's hinted that everybody didn't just go home during the storm on Jurassic Park in the novel like we see in the movie, where there's that big moment where they say, "Hey, a storm's coming. We got to get everybody off the island. Only skeleton staff to stay." Because there's a moment where after the storm hits and the power is out, Hammond's getting a construction crew to fix a wall, and he doesn't care that there's dinosaurs out there, and that's a part of why he's out there is he's trying to get these construction workers to make repairs to fix the wall before people realize that something had gone wrong. And that's just exactly the type of character Hammond is here's a disaster, you have people that are hurt and dying, and yeah, but I need a pork car.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I really like about the expanded media as well, just as a bit of a side tangent, is that a lot of the expanded content is at least dubiously canon, and you often see, oh, right, there were other people working on the island. It wasn't just, yeah, it was effectively a skeleton crew, sure, but it's a big operation. There was loads of other people doing their jobs still when this hit. Like ages back, I played like it was almost a point and click, but not quite. I think it was Telltale's even Jurassic Park game. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, there was like vet staff and things that we didn't see.
Yeah, there was a ton packed into Jurassic Park, and I would love for if I don't want it anytime soon, so please don't take this the wrong way. But if they ever reboot the Jurassic Park series way down the line, I wish they would do a little bit more honor to the original novel, just so that we can see it fleshed out. But I think some of the other parts that are drastically different is the technology. Like Michael, when he wrote Jurassic Park, he was on the cutting edge of technology at the time period. So cloning, but computer technology and phone technology, and that all played a huge piece in writing Jurassic Park that we don't really get to see or appreciate in the movies. Where it's like, why don't they call the main line, right? Like back home. Why don't they just call somebody to come rescue them? And in the novel, he explains that they're doing a major update, a patch to the system. They have these six supercomputers that run the genetic work behind Jurassic Park. And Nedry uses that opportunity to shut down the phone lines for that patching work with his team because he has a whole tech team back on the mainland. While that's happening is when he shuts down the security system and he goes through and he conducts his theft. You get a very minimized version of that in the movie, but the book fleshes it out and it makes a lot of sense why everything's happening at that very moment.
Crichton is not one to hand wave things if he can get away with not hand waving things.
Somebody said this about Crichton, where he uses enough facts in his fiction that his fiction becomes facts. And I thought that was the perfect way to describe the way Crichton writes is he puts enough pseudoscience in there that if it's not real in a couple of years, something like that will probably be real.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like 95, 98, they were trying to clone lambs out in South Africa. So absolutely something that ended up being somewhat realistic. I just love that he was so on the cutting edge of not just genetic technology, but computer technology at the time period.
One of the things that makes Jurassic Park so good is that everything that happens in it feels plausible. Everything that happens feels like it could happen in reality to some extent.
Yeah, he does a great way of forming that. Um, do we want to talk about any of the other characters and how they
Oh, yes.
differ from? Yeah. So I derailed us by talking, my fanboyism over Michael
That's
Crichton.
the whole premise of the show. But no, I think the other one we have to address is probably Grant himself as our sort of main character. Because
Yeah.
book Grant and movie Grant are actually fairly different too, because book Grant is the biggest difference I remember, weirdly enough, because it has been a little bit since I read the book, admittedly, is that book Grant likes kids.
Yeah, he likes kids. He's an older guy too. I
Yeah,
thought that was
he is a
pretty
bit
like
older in the book, I think.
yeah, he's old. Not that this matters. They describe him as having a long beard, and there's not a potential love interest between him and Sadler. It's very much a professional. She's my protege, and I care about her because she's a young aspiring student. And there's not that like are they going to be lovers like they kind of teased you in the movie? Very much not that. In the novel, he sees himself as an older uh, sage for her, essentially. Likes kids, which I don't want to get ahead of us, but the kids are drastically different in the novel as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, are they that drastically different? I know that, I mean, they've flipped their ages in the movie.
Yeah, so the boy is the older one in the novelization, and the girl's the younger. But the girl is so young that she ends up kind of sparking most of the chases. So one of the key ones I remember is she's on the boat, they're trying to escape, and they see the sleeping T-Rex, and she can't stop coughing, so she starts coughing very loudly, and it wakes up the T-Rex. And the brother says something to her. She goes, "It's not my fault," but she's like so young not to realize like the immense danger she just put everybody in. And I hate to say it, but she is kind of the driving factor of a lot of the chase scenes between Grant and various different animals they encounter during their escape across the island.
Yeah, she's very not nearly as cognizant of the danger in the book. I feel like Tim, the boy, isn't that different between them, to be fair, but because it's not so much they flipped their ages, it's more like they aged Alexis up and left him more or less the same.
Yeah, because he ends up being more of the savvy one between
Yeah,
the
the
two.
reasonable one, whilst in the movie it's
Yeah,
the other way around.
Yeah, and I think that's I can't really remember him too much in the book. Uh, he didn't have a lot of stage presence in the novelization to for me to tell you, yeah, there's drastic difference between him and her, but the girl was I don't know how to say other than she was a plot driving device for
Yeah.
every moment that they were until they got back to the visitor center.
I wonder if that's why they changed her in the movie to give her more of like something to contribute, so it felt less like a situation like that.
Yeah, and I think a part of that also is they cut a lot of Grant's chase across the island. So in the movie, you get the car scene, and then they go to the tree, they see the brachiosaurs, and then they climb the fence, power comes back on, and then they're back at the visitor center, right? And then there's the chase with the kids and the raptors. In the novel, they have encounters with various different animals. They see triceratops, they see stegosauruses, they see dilophosaurs when they're near the river. They have run-ins with raptors and juvenile raptors, and then they have a giant boat scene chase. Oh, they have a pterodactyl chase scene as well. There, the Avery scene from JP3 happens with Grant and the kids during
Yeah.
his escape across the island. So a ton was cut out right there. So I guess from that perspective, if they're going to cut out all those big areas, it makes sense to change her character. I just thought it was unusual that they made her older and then they gave her the tech savvy side of it, because I think in the novel, the boy was interested in computers and stuff like that. The little girl was very into dinosaurs, so they kind of like gave it to the boy in the movie, and then made her like a computer
Yeah.
whiz.
I don't. I'm not sure what the like dynamic there was in the book. I really should pick up and read it again sometime soon. But the other thing with Grant is I feel like he feels like he has a very different initial. I think book Grant feels more skeptical of the whole thing than movie Grant does, because movie Grant at first, when you first meet him, is like, oh yeah, all right, and then he sees the dinosaurs and he's like a child again. I feel like book Grant was a lot more skeptical from the beginning to end, where he was kind of like, don't know about this living dinosaurs thing.
Yeah, they again they kind of just summarized key moments in the movie version, the novelization of him. I think one of the big scenes is like when he's looking at the hatchery and they hand him the baby velociraptor. They have to force the raptor away from him because he's like probing it with his fingers because he's trying to feel where all the organs are. He, I think the best way to put it is he is written as a scientist in the novel,
Yes.
whereas the movie has science elements to him, but he becomes kind of this action slash hero savior for the sake of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about go as far as to call him an action hero because he does spend the entire time fleeing and running for his life. But he is definitely he definitely ends up more of a caretaker. Yeah, I said skeptical, but you're right. I think scientifically minded is more accurate because he does still get lost in the dinosaurs. It's just that he looks at the whole picture from a place of logic, figuring out how everything works, figuring out if this is really feasible, if it's real, what's in these dinosaurs.
Yeah, and something else is the dynamic between him and Ian, which I think this is a good segue into how different Ian is. Ian is kind of that rock star character still, but he's a extremely skeptical and smart mathematician, which you do see some in the movie, and they honored him in that way. But he has points that he brings up, like I mentioned earlier about the breeding, and he doesn't get met with the hostility from the other scientists like he does in the movie. So like in the movie, Grant kind of rolls his eyes at Ian several times. You don't get that sensation from the novel. They have back and forth about like what's the importance of having a species that's now extinct on our planet? What about diseases? Did you think about what if they brought back diseases that we're not ready for? And they have this conversation, but they do it in a scientific manner where like, yeah, here's all the things that real scientists think about, but here's this like egomaniac Hammond who doesn't really care about these things. He's just, plugging away trying to get the money out of it. You get a cartoonized version of that in the movie.
like Malcolm feels one of the least changed. I feel like his character between the two is very consistent, but his relationship with Grant is definitely a lot less hostile in books. I think that's one of the things that makes Grant feel more skeptical and grounded in the books compared to his movie counterpart, is because in the movie it's almost like Grant is the idealist to the reasoned version of Ian. You know, he's like he wants the dinosaurs to be real because it's his life. He's a dinosaur fanatic, and Ian is a lot more concerned with the the logic of it all, the numbers. Whilst in the books, they have a lot more back of a reasoned back and forth, and you're considering all the different angles. And even though Ian is much the same, because he has that less hostile, more open-minded relationship with Grant in the book, it makes Grant feel more open-minded and reasonable by extension.
Yeah, the exchange between all the visitors, that relationship, I think, is the big change between Ian and the movie version. And then Ian has more, I'm going to say, screen time in the novel, but even though it's obviously not a screen, whereas the movie, they give him key moments, but he's not like the driving factor of like identifying the problems in the park like he was in the novel.
Yeah. Yeah, in the novel, he does kind of point out everything that's going to happen before it happens.
Yeah, he's very much you know, a fortune teller in a different sense by just he uses logic and math to point it out. But yeah, he shows up and he's immediately not gonna say hostile, but extremely skeptical of this entire situation. And when Hammond or any of the park staff brings up anything, he calls them on their bullshit immediately. Where in the movie you get like one or two scenes where like he does that, but it's like constant in the novel. He never stops.
No. Well, he stops eventually.
Well, I mean, technically, but then he brings it, I hate to say that I know what happened between like book one and book two. Like I read the conversation with Michael Crichton and Steven Spielberg, and Michael Crichton did not want to write book two, but he did it because Spielberg asked him to. And I think that's hilarious, knowing how Jurassic Park one ends and how the Lost World begins.
That
So
I've been meaning because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. And you've just filled in a blank for me because I did not, that's a missing piece of information I had because for the longest time, it's driven me mad that book two opens with, I can't remember who said it, but the quote, tales of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Because spoilers from this book from, God knows when. I can't remember when it was, like 90s, 80s, it might have been.
yeah, first book was 80s and the second book I think was the early 90s.
Yeah. Uh, Ian dies very violently after the whole T-Rex incident. Well, not, I mean, it's all violent death, but it's a very prolonged dying. He's injured for a while and eventually succumbs to his wounds. And then at the beginning of book two, the sequel, Lost World, he's alive and the main character. And I was like, what? Because it makes sense for the movie because he survives in the movie to go on to become the main character for the Lost World. So my assumption for a long time was the book happened, Jurassic Park happened, it was really good, and then the two movies happened, and then Crichton went, "Oh, I should do another book to cash in on that," and did a novelization of the book. And then I later on found out that that wasn't the case. The books both predated the movies. I think the second book even predates the first movie. So for a long time, I've been like, well, why did he do that then? There was no movie to prompt him to retcon in survival, and now I know why.
Yeah, the conversation that I'm aware of, and you can find this on several sources out there. I don't know where they predate on movies. It may have published before the first movie was officially in theaters, but Spielberg came to Michael
Yeah,
Crichton and said, "Hey, look, this is going to be such a huge success. You're going to have to write book two." And Crichton didn't want to continue the story, and he said, "Well, what happens if I don't write?" He goes, "Well, we're going to make a movie two without you then." And Michael Crichton just didn't want his ideas out there without some of his penmanship behind it, so he ended up writing it. And if you're not familiar with Michael Crichton, he always has a I'm going to say the an expert. I don't want to say a scientist. He has an expert that kind of gives you exposition into what's happening. And within Jurassic Park, a lot of people say that Ian Malcolm is Michael Crichton inserting himself into it. So I think it's very funny that he brought Malcolm back so that he could sit there and complain for about 300 pages about why this was an unnecessary book, which is if you read the two books, Jurassic Park, the first one, is a much more action-packed book as opposed to the second book,
Which
which
is
is the
funny because the
opposite.
movies do the other way around.
Exactly. It's a smaller cast in the book. The first half of it, I would say, I don't have the book in front of me, is really just espionage. Like people break into Ian's office, they steal data, they steal samples from animals that they've been finding on the mainland all around the world. Biosyn breaks into Engine's old offices and they steal information about like where the second island is. And they send a team and Ian goes out there and it's like Ian, Sarah, a couple people with them, and then the Biosyn team, which is like three people in a Jeep. Uh, they go out there, but all that buildup is if you read between it, there's a lot of sarcasm in between there of like Ian just being very dark, I guess you can say it, which you see in the movie. But that's I think a lot of that comes down to Michael Crichton was like, I just didn't want to write this. I didn't want to write this.
That's very funny. I mean, I approve. Well done, Michael Crichton. But
Still a
I,
great book.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I actually, I own the second book. I haven't read it. I've read the first chapter, but bringing Malcolm back when I've just read him die completely pulls me out of it. I can't.
Yeah.
I just can't read it because it breaks its own continuity so obviously, retcons itself so obviously. I can't do it. My suspension of disbelief is just erased. I don't have that with the movies, weirdly enough, even though I know he dies in the book because they're kind of their own thing.
Yeah. And for anybody wondering how they do it, the justification in book two is so Ian bleeds to death at the end of Jurassic Park, and we hear about it secondhand from somebody telling Dr. Grant like they're segmented in a hotel and they're not allowed to leave that hotel, so they're hanging by the poolside, and they get word that Ian died of blood loss, and it kind of just moves on, and they're telling the rest of the story from there. In the Lost World, a Navy medical team provides blood. I think it's Navy. Don't hold me to it, but they're able to give him enough blood and get his heart started again, and then he recovers in the hospital. So, yeah, it's not very well done. But again, I just think it's funny that Michael Crichton didn't want to do that, and that was his way of like, you're not going to write this movie without me.
I mean, knowing that does make it kind of funny at least. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's a shame because I'm sure it is a good book, but I just yeah, I just couldn't do it, especially because I
yeah.
was trying to read them back to back.
If you get into it, just be prepared that moment. Like, if you think that Jurassic Park took a long time building up to getting to the island and like the dinosaurs breaking out, the Lost World is an extremely slow read. Because my like I love the books too. I had my wife read them both when we got married, and she liked Jurassic Park, and then she struggled with the Lost World because so much of it is about like the fallout from Jurassic Park and Ian going off and starting this group that like hunts down old engine assets and engines political fallout, things like that, and Biosyn trying to get in on the assets that Engine left behind. So it's a very slow book compared to the first novel.
I don't mind a slow burn.
Okay.
That's fine.
Just trying to level set it. I still like it because there's some great scenes in it. One of my favorite raptor kill scene is in that one. So,
We love a good raptor kill.
oh yeah, that's so Muldoon. Muldoon also is a complete shift from the movie and the novel.
I don't remember his novel counterpart very much, actually.
So still the hunter. He lives, which I think is the biggest thing. Like he is not killed by a smart girl. And he doesn't hunt with a shotgun. He hunts with a rocket launcher, which I think is hilarious if you put that in context of like what the movie became. So a big like headbutting match happens throughout the entire first novel between Muldoon and Hammond. And Muldoon wants bigger equipment. Like one, he doesn't
Right.
want yeah, he doesn't want certain dinosaurs. He doesn't want a T-Rex and he doesn't want velociraptors. And Hammond overruled and he said, well, I'm gonna quit unless you can give me certain equipment. So one of them is he wants 3 rocket launchers, which is actually really important with Dennis Nedry because he has 2 rocket launchers ready to go when the park goes down, and he puts one in his Jeep, and Nedry steals his Jeep, so he doesn't have his rocket
Yes.
launcher. He preps. So part of that plot line is he needs to go get his other rocket launcher, which is on the other side of the island, to hunt the T Rex. And so he goes off, finds the rocket launcher, and then it's him hunting raptors and Rexes for, I say, a quarter of the book until he gets to the end. I think that's the biggest deviation. And then the attorney isn't a coward either.
No, he's a much nicer person, and he shows more concern for the kids in the book than Hammond does.
Yeah, he's actually a good guy in the book.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still scared because like he's a normal guy in a terrible situation. But when Muldoon has to go hunting for the T Rex because they realize that, so in the novels there's 2 T Rexes. There's a juvenile and an adult. When he realizes the adult T Rex has escaped, he needs somebody to help him hunt. So he takes the attorney with him. And he doesn't want to, but he realizes nobody else is able to because, like, Ian, I think, is already hurt. Hammond is someplace else on the island. Sadler is helping Ian because he's hurt. So he's like, "Yeah, you're going to go with me." And they go off and they hunt raptors and T Rexes together. Not at all the attorney that we got in the movie.
I can't believe I had forgotten about that. That is such a massive change in character.
Yeah, and he also lives, which is another, like, flip to the entire script. Um, Doctor Wu is a significant character in the novel version, and it's such a shame that in the movie version, all his only scene is in the hatchery, and then he's never talked about again. And I hated that.
That is actually a good jumping off point that I wanted to talk about though, because Doctor Wu becomes a much bigger player in the wider sort of cinematic universe kind of thing that we have in the Jurassic Park franchise now. A lot more like how he played a much more significant role in the books originally. So I just want to say, how do you feel about the sort of the movie and now this whole the movie is a plural, I'm saying this now, there's this much wider joint universe. There's there's all the movies, there's games, there's animated series now. There's all this other stuff. How do you feel about all that? That whatever you're familiar with, anyway.
Yeah, so I've seen all the movies except for the most recent movie, and that probably is going to tell you how I feel about them. And it's that I feel like the first 2 movies were phenomenal movies. I know people have an issue with The Lost World on the movie side because of the way the cutting happened in the San Diego scene. I think that's what people get hung up on. But if you go back, that movie, both writing and story wise, holds up very well. The animatronics from the time period holds up very well. I can't say that about any of the subsequent movies. I know a lot of people are very big fans of Jurassic Park 3.
There are.
From Oh yes, there are. I've run into quite a few that they have. That is their, and if you look at who the age demographic, I'm not being mean by saying this. That was their Jurassic Park that they grew up on. So I grew up on Jurassic Park and the Lost World. They grew up on Jurassic Park 3, and then probably got reintroduced to the first 2 movies. But 3 was cut scenes from the first book.
Basically.
Yeah, plastered over a weak storyline. I thought the first Jurassic World was a decent reboot. Yeah, I thought it was unnecessary, but I thought there were cool concepts into it, and they brought elements from the Lost World that were cut into it, like the camouflaging dinosaurs that came from the Lost World book. Um, Everything after that was pretty terrible though, and the last one, which was that I saw, I thought it was Dominion, but it's the one where all the original cast comes back.
Yeah, I think that's Dominion.
Okay, I felt like that was just Marvel with dinosaurs. It was Marvel humor with a convoluted plot, with the characters not acting the way the characters should have. Like, I get that people change, but they became like cartoon characters of themselves in that movie. So I don't really care for most of the movies beyond that. Now, the extended universe, that's really vague. I haven't seen the cartoon Lost World or the Jurassic Park cartoons. I have played a lot of the games, starting back all the way from like the Sega version. I played the infamous Trespasser game, which kind of got crapped on because it wasn't ready for release, but it had a ton of lore in it. I do plan on playing the upcoming Jurassic Park survival horror game.
I didn't know that was a thing, and now I'm invested.
Oh yeah, it looks great. You got to go out. They've released the trailers for it, and you get to see this. Like it's right after everybody gets evacuated from the original movie, and there's like a vet that gets left behind. So yeah, go out there, look at the
I,
trailer. It
I wonder if
looks
she's the same
phenomenal.
vet from the Telltale game. Huh.
I don't think so, and I say that only because, again, super big nerd in the Jurassic Park universe. The Telltale game got overwritten and is no longer considered canon because of the Dominion
Uh,
movies. Yeah. Like yeah, the Jurassic World movies make that storyline not
that's a
canon
shame. I
anymore.
liked that game. I didn't get to finish it because it crashed and wouldn't fix itself, but
Yeah, I'm not a huge Telltale game person, but I thought the story in that game was great. Uh, but yeah, that so getting back to your baseline question, I'm not a huge fan of the other movies. Now, that being said, what I thought was great is that they did bring back Wu, and I thought that they were gonna give the right character arc to him, and then Dominion ruined it, in my opinion, because in the book, the creation kills the creator. So Wu gets violently killed in front of all of his friends by a velociraptor, which is the irony because he didn't want to make velociraptors fast. He didn't want to make them able to jump. He wanted to make them the version that most people had at the time period of dinosaurs, which was slow lumbering. And then he goes forward with it, and then it becomes like an ego trip for him to show how well he can do it. In the book, it talks about how the percentage of correct dinosaur DNA, every batch of new dinosaurs he releases, they have more correct DNA, and he's trying to strive for like that 100% authentic real dinosaur by the end of his career. And then he gets killed by one of the velociraptors violently in front of everybody. And I was hoping since they brought him back in the Jurassic World series, and they were doing that with the weird Endorex and all the experimentations, that they were going to give him the send off of that, and they ended up making him like a hero, and he solves world hunger at the end of
of
Dominion.
course
So
he does.
uh, yeah, very Marvel-ish.
Yeah, I say I haven't seen Dominion, and I've only seen parts and sort of cliff notes of Fallen Kingdom, but uh, I have similar feelings about the movies, and obviously about the second book,
Yeah,
in that I think that the first two movies are really good. Obviously, the first is by far the best, but the Lost World movie, I liked it. I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, and yeah, I don't know why it gets crapped on so much because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think the raptors in the tall grass should be one of the most iconic scenes in movies, and it's just not.
yeah, I agree that scene is phenomenal.
And then the third one happened, and it was terribly written. It was weirdly goofy. The pacing was awful. I mean, it was cool that they had a Spinosaurus. Big fan. Couldn't have killed a T-Rex like that, but sure. Uh, you know, and
Yeah,
it was a low point for sure. And then, years later, Jurassic World happens, and I'm like, okay, we're doing this again. Let's try it again. And I enjoyed that movie. I enjoyed Jurassic World. It was fun. I had no major complaints, but it was hardly a masterpiece like the original. It was just a decent movie. And then it sounds like there's
yeah.
some good stuff in Fallen Kingdom, but it's starting to tank again. And then I have not heard a single good thing about Dominion. I've not been brave enough to look much into Rebirth, but I hear it's not that great either.
Yeah, my wife went and saw Rebirth, and I asked her, I was like, "So is it worth seeing?" And she was, "You can watch everything on the trailer." And I was like, "Okay." I was like,
I feel
"Got it,
like
got
I feel
it."
like this as a franchise, Jurassic Park suffers from a trend I've identified in a lot of horror media where familiarity kills the horror. The longer the franchise goes on, the more we get familiarized with the monsters, in this case the dinosaurs, the more we see them, the more we shift from oh crap they're scary to oh crap they're cool, and then the writers are kind of got stuck that, well, we can't make them scary anymore, so we have to lean into the cool, and eventually you get an action or adventure franchise spawning out of it. It's kind of inevitable. It happened to Godzilla. It happens with all the slashes.
Yeah, I think that's a good take actually. And I'm going to compare to another series I'm a huge fan of, and that's the Alien series. That when
Yeah.
Alien came out in 1999, it was a phenomenal horror movie. And I think James Cameron did the right thing when he made Aliens. He said, "Look, it's already scary. I need to do something different." And he did the right thing. He made it an action movie. So you have a horror and then you have an action movie, you have an expanded universe. But somebody out there, I blame Hollywood for not being willing to take risks. Once they see something's making money, they just want to milk it. And Alien 3 suffered because of that, because there were so many rewrites. And then Resurrection became kind of like a comedy, in my opinion. And then they didn't know what to do with it anymore, so they went back and did a series of prequels, but a part of what made Alien scary was you didn't know the origins of the creature. You didn't know the origins of that crashed ship, and the second you told us everything, you kinda just ruined the first movie. You didn't really make it scary, and that's the same thing I think we saw in the Jurassic Park movies was you had a phenomenal hit movie with Jurassic Park, and then they created a more action-oriented movie in The Lost World, and then they're like, "Hey, we have to milk this until the cow's completely dry."
Yeah, and see, that's one of the reasons though that I actually like a lot of the sort of extended stuff. One of the reasons I really like the game, the Telltale game, is that they looked at it and they realized, okay, we can't lean as strongly into the horror, so we'll lean more into the survival aspect and the characters. And obviously, they're marketed, they are aimed at children and they're not for everyone. But the recent cartoons that they did are actually very good Jurassic Park stories.
Yeah, my wife was very into him as well, and she said the same.
They managed to get the horror back a little bit. Obviously, they can't go full horror because it's target audience. But they also recognized, okay, we can't do the same thing again, and we don't just want to have a Jurassic World movie situation where it's all spectacle. So they leaned into the survival. They leaned into the like what being trapped in this environment, the effects it would have on these young people who are stuck in this situation, and they made it a very character centric story. And it's stuff like that that is how you keep a franchise like this alive without, you know, dishonoring its roots, without losing the things that made it work.
Yeah, I definitely think that we don't need another movie for a very, very long time, and if they do a movie, it has to be a complete reboot, but I don't want that. I think that we just need to accept that we had 2 perfect movies that came out of it. We have 2 great novels that came out of it. I don't need another Jurassic World movie, though, and I feel like Hollywood won't listen to me.
They
I feel
clearly
like we're
aren't.
gonna get another one.
We got Was It Rebirth happened, and that's a soft reboot at best, a yet another sequel at worst.
And I get that they're trying to stretch the themes from Jurassic Park across all these movies, but they went down such a rabbit hole instead of just kind of like if you have a dinosaur franchise and your answer is to make a monster that's not truly a dinosaur, you're losing your direction. And I hate to say it for anybody who's really big into the Jurassic World series. That's exactly what they did. They said, and they even said it in the movie. They said people are getting tired of dinosaurs, so we had to put more teeth on it and make it scarier, bigger.
Hilariously enough, that's one of the things that makes Jurassic World, the first of the new movies, actually kind of work. Is that they went, okay, we've said enough about the hubris of science. Now let's talk about the hubris of capitalism. And whilst it was definitely not a great movie, it was hardly the most thematically layered movie or anything. It was mostly just a fun popcorn movie. I did appreciate that they realized they couldn't really do the same thing again and went, okay, so why would this happen? Because capitalists are stupid. Because they will chase the money regardless of the risk, even if it almost borrowed from Hammond's in the book's original origins.
Yeah, but my I guess my counterpoint to that would be would you have rather they made that movie and all the Jurassic World movies that followed, or would you have rather that Hollywood just let the Jurassic Park series end with either two or three, and they just do something brand new that wasn't hoping that you would buy a ticket just because it had Jurassic in the
Oh
title?
yeah, no, obviously I would prefer the option where we stopped at two. I will say my ideal version of this is we get Jurassic Park 1 and 2, we skip 3, we can do Jurassic World if you really want, but we don't really need to. And then you can still give me the animated ones because they're really good, and some of the games because they're really good, and everything else can stop.
Yeah, I remember in the 90s reading the comic books about
Oh, I
Jurassic
didn't know
Park.
there were
None of them
comics.
are. Oh, there's a ton of Alan Grant goes back to Jurassic Park and like they hunt dinosaurs. It's very based on the movie, not
Right,
the
right.
novel, which I'm gonna spoil the novel. At the end of Jurassic Park, the Navy
Yeah.
bombs the island. They just toast the island like they hit it with napalm over and over again. So nothing lives on the island after that. In the movie, obviously, they don't do anything like that, and the lysine contingency they hope is gonna kill the dinosaurs, and then obviously you find out that that's not the case. The comic books before The Lost World became a thing chased the idea that the lysine contingency wasn't working because the herbivores were eating plants that were heavy in lysine, and then the dinosaurs were carnivores ate the herbivores, getting the lysines they needed, which it developed into a conversation in the second movie. But the comic books are just like out there, and they were very much tied to a toy line to try and
Ah,
sell the toys, but they were fun. So.
yeah. So as we sort of get towards the end of our time, something I do want to ask, because you are obviously a writer yourself, is how the being such a big Jurassic Park nerd as you should be, and having read the books, seen the movies, played some of the games, apparently read the comics I didn't even know existed. How has all the various Jurassic Park media, but especially Crichton's books even, how would you say that's influenced your writing? How much of that how much of that like writing genealogy can you trace back to those books from yours?
I tell people that my first novel, which was A Fold to Extinction, was a love letter to me as a kid. It was very heavily inspired by my exposure to Jurassic Park, to Dino Crisis. I even have little call outs in it. Like I have in the prologue, I have a character named Michael Crichton as a giant head nod. Like I know this wouldn't exist without you, man. I put jokes about Jurassic Park littered throughout my first novel. And it's a dinosaur novel if you haven't caught on
Yeah,
with
I got
the
that.
name
Yeah.
of it. Yeah, didn't go the dinosaur cloning route. I came up with a different theme into it. But overall, his ability to write vicious, savage scenes while still being very technical has been a huge inspiration for me. And my current series, which is my most popular novels, which is the Alone Together series, I have to thank Michael Crichton for getting me so heavily into reading. I've read almost every one of his novels now because I'm such a huge fan of him, and I aspire to one day be at his level. And I think Alone Together, you can find the roots of that because I have characters that are technical experts that give little expositions to it. And I've become what my friends have started calling me a sensory author, which is I don't give you a lot of visual descriptions of like characters, but you're going to feel when they're in the dirt, you're gonna smell what they're smelling, and you're gonna feel the pains that they feel as they're experiencing it. And that's what I want people to take out of it. And I go back and I say that I got a lot of that from my exposure to Michael
Yeah,
Crichton.
I always advocate for remembering that we have senses other than sight, especially if
Yeah,
especially if you're trying to write something very visceral or horrific.
yeah. I mean, who cares if the character has blonde hair or whatever? I want to know the smell of diesel and gasoline mixing it with salt water as they're crossing over the ocean, things like that. It puts you in this in place with them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do admit I am one of those writers who has a tendency to tell you what people look like. I can't help it. It's because there's a picture of them in my head and I want other people's pictures to match.
And that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying my method isn't. I found what works for me, but
I was meant to say, but I do still 100% agree that you should remember that we have other senses because it doubles, it triples immersion.
yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, Michael Crichton, I would say is my biggest overall influence in writing style and voice. And I've I'm thankful that I've met my most recent editor who's really helped me hone my voice. So I think I've gotten better since the Full to Extinction. I'm releasing a new addition to Alone Together in June. So book three will be out there. I have Sinner's Pass, which is a character driven horror story, and then a Full to Extinction, which is again my love letter to myself as a kid and every Jurassic Park fan out
So
there.
as we're getting to the end, where can people find all of that and find you if they want to follow with the development of all these books?
Yeah, I'm really active on X under SS Fitzgerald. You can find my website, ssfitzgerald.net. I'm also a Dark Veil Society author, and I'm one of the co-founders of Walpurgis for Literacy, which is a nonprofit for helping kids learn how to read and write. So X, SS Fitzgerald, Instagram, SS Fitzgerald. I'm on Facebook, also under, surprisingly enough, SS Fitzgerald or ssfitzgerald.net. I have free short stories in my blog on my website. And then if you want to take a look at my novels, I'm on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and the Crafty Bookstore.
Awesome, and yeah, clearly you're a man of culture as a lover of dinosaurs and Jurassic Park, so I highly recommend people go and check all of that out. And if you guys, oh
I
yeah,
appreciate
if you guys want to find my stuff, basically everything I do can be found on my site, radfordwrites.com, including, these episodes if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube or anything like that. Also all goes up there. My books are available there. I put stories and poems and things up there as well as various blogs and articles. Basically everything I do can be found there. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you so much for inviting me again.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming and giving me an excuse to geek out about Jurassic Park for an hour.
Anytime I can spend a couple more hours doing it if you want.
All right. Better not. We both have things to do, I'm sure. So we'll call it there. Thank you for coming and thank you for listening.
Absolutely.